Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. There's a link I posted recently in the Aula page with some links from Dan around Git, and there are simulations of Git branching operations. So have a look. It really, really helps to visualize what's happening with it. There is also a video just on the Git branching that's up. So yeah, it's nice and neat and concise. So you can go there as well. Is week 10 live on Aula? Oh, let's have a look. It should be, unless I've accidentally made it not that way.
I can't see it. Just so you know.
Hold on. Right, so here you'll see what I see. Because I think I'm sharing my screen, aren't I? Okay.
No, you're not sharing the screen.
Oh no. Okay.
And my Teams is slowed right down, so I don't even know if you can hear me now.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Well, unless you said that 10 minutes ago. It's actually really hard to tell, isn't it?
Yeah, really hard.
Okay, so this is what I see, and week 9 live session. Yeah, according to me, it's there. Hold on, is week 10? Oh, it's because I made the wrong one. No. Wait, have I missed a week? This is week 10. Yeah, no, that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, we did object orientation last week. Makes sense.
Sorry, what was the? Oh,
Week
was the
10
question
is still
is
not
today
visible.
up? Sorry,
It's not
sorry,
visible.
it is.
You've got the little eye.
Oh, that's because that's because it's not. It wasn't. Yeah, sorry, I misunderstood the question. I thought you were asking last week's is up. No, this week's isn't because it's still on a piece of paper. I haven't had a chance to do my usual notes and then upload. And the thing is, I really hate the editing features in Aula. So they like to have all the emojis and stuff. So what I've got is I've got a file which so I can write the timings and stuff in, do all that, include all my notes. And then it runs some Python across it to create the text that goes in, so that I can just copy and paste. So until I do that, I haven't actually got the stuff, and there's no way I'm sitting there and doing all the emojis by hand. I've tried to stick with the theme and decorate everything, but I am an old person, and it does make me feel uncomfortable, if I'm honest, having to put pictures and everything. It's I'm looking now at the amount of sort of little icons and stuff that are appearing in chat, but I'm not entirely sure of the use of them. Thank you, Stanley. See, if I put that, I could probably lose my job. It depends on how it's interpreted. Anyway, I'm going to close off chat because it's already distracting me. And I'm going to go through to the VM. This stuff off before we go any further. Save that for later. And find. I'll tell you about that, Dan. That later, Dan. I've been having fun with that idea. I didn't really have time, but it was more interesting on Friday night than doing something else. Right. GitHub. So we talked about branching. Branching is something that happens within a single repository, right? So you create a branch, and it is related to the point at which it was branched. So you can visualize where those things come from, and those tools that we mentioned earlier that are posted on Aula are fantastic for visualizing that. But essentially, they are parallel lines of development within one repository. So you can actually push them all in one go or pull them all in one go. You can move them around. Whereas a fork, which you've been using, is a different prospect. So a fork is a copy of the repository at the point that you make the copy, and then it's its own development later on. Now, in many ways, you can kind of think of this as just being like a mega branch, right? But it doesn't have to be owned by the same person. So these now are related but separate lines of development. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, if you remember, branching at branch face from last week. And we're going to use this as our basis. Okay, so I couldn't really make a Forky McFork face very easily, so there isn't one of those to go with. You'll have to sort of try this out for yourself. Because I own this one, there's no way I'm going to sit here and go through hundreds of students submitting merge requests. So you'll have to just make your own forks to try this stuff out. What we're going to do though is, well, you can see there are 24 people that have forked this. I'm going to create a new fork. I'll put it under my own username. Here it is. So we now have CSX239, branching at branch face, and we should also have the one that's in the CUEH organisation. So it kind of helps to see the difference between the two things. Okay. Now you can tell even at this point that GitHub knows that this came from CUEH master, right? So this is coming from over here. Okay, so you can tell where things come from. You can see as well the forks 25. So you can see that it's one of the 25 things that has a similar thing. That was 24 before. And I think if you click on here, you can see where these things are. So you can see all the people that have been doing the fork. You can see the people who've been working on stuff. All good. Now, in the case of the project, this would be a good time to think, well, we're going to have some common features that we want in all of our repositories. So what I would suggest that's done, this is what's in the documentation as well, is that the first thing you do is you create a new repository, or you create a fork of the code that I'm going to provide you with if you want to start with that. And from there, you first of all make your own forks, but you work on the common stuff initially. Things like the documentation, writing down how things are going to go, who's going to do what, what are the interesting things. Use that, but you would edit these things for yourself first, work on the bits that you're working on, and then you would contribute them back to the main part. Okay, so one of you is going to want to be the person that does the original fork and keeps that, and does it, but you'd make the other people contributors if you wanted to have them in there, or you work separately and you merge across, as you'll see in a minute. There's different ways that you can go about these things. Okay, so I'm going to check this one out just to make some changes. There we go. So okay, what am I doing wrong? I really hate Linux clipboards. There we go. So we've got this cloned into there. I'm going to go in. You can see it looks exactly like it did before. It's a master branch. It's called branching at branch face, but this one is mine and not the other. So first thing you might want to know is, well, how do I tell the difference? How do I know if they can have the same name but be different things? How can I tell? And one of the things is probably from the URL. So git remote, get URL, and you have to tell it which one we want. So I think we can do all. And a name. So origin. There we go. You can tell how often I do that. Not very. So there we go. Git remote, get URL, or origin. It tells me that this comes from here. Okay, so you can see the server, and you can see the owner, and you can see the name of the repository. If I just pop up another one of these and go to my original checkout, the one that I created that the others are forked from, so that's in here, and use the same command, you can see the difference. Okay, so you can see here and here. If they had different names, obviously, or even if they're on different servers, you'd see this differently as well. Okay, so close that one. So there we are. So we're in this this fork, sorry, and we're going to do some work on this. And it might even be that you want to have a branch within this, okay, and work on things separately. You can use these things in combination. So let's say for now I'm going to work on the README, okay. I'm going to work on the documentation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do git bad for some reason, but my history works. All right, git checkout. Do you remember this? So git checkout, and I'm going to call this documentation. So -b means that we want to make a new branch and go there. All right. So you notice this is from here, so that's useful. And if you wanted to find out what branch you're on, you can see that we're on the documentation branch. And if we do all, you can see that there is also the experimental branches over there. So you can see those other things are still related. Okay, even though this is a new fork, it's got the branches on the remote version that we had in the original one. Okay, but we're in the documentation branch, and I'm going to edit the README file. And so one of the things I would hope that you would do very early on in what you're doing with the project is you would collaborate on writing some documentation about how you're going to continue, right? So I would do something like, you know, team members, Alice, Bob, Claire, and Dave. So, you know, the classic pretend people, A, B, C, and D. And we might do something like, you know, I don't know, list of currently available plugins. We might do, I don't know, password lister, so something that lists the contents of the password file. So you might have, you know, some information. Where's the source file? You can maybe even have a link to it, so you can click and go directly to if you want to have a look. You might put the author in. You might put, you know, some documentation, like, you know, how to use it. You know, any kind of warnings you want to put in there, and you'd work on this. Doesn't necessarily have to be all finished all in one go, but this is the kind of thing that you'd want to keep in there. So that's just a markdown file, which if you've not actually tried this stuff before, you use plain text, and you've got a hash at the start of each line that you want to be a heading, double hash for subheading, and you can add more hashes up to, is it 6, I think, to get subheadings from there. If you want to make things into a proper list, you just do it as you kind of would if you're writing this in ASCII, and it will.
James, sorry, is this is just done by the individual in the group, isn't it? It's not a.
I would say that you collaborate on this. All right, so
Sure.
you can do it. You can do it on one person's account. You can all talk about it. You can have a chat, decide what you're doing, and one person can document it. Because what you'll do in a minute after you've worked this stuff out is you're then going to want to submit this as a merge request to the master or to other people's repositories if you don't want to work with an actual master fork. Okay, it's completely up to people how they go about that part, but I'll show you anyway. You'll see. Don't worry. So let's say that's all I'm going to do for now. Save that, and you can see that I've got some changes. So git add readme, git commit for example. Okay, oh, it's not actually how to spell commit. It's actually spell. I'm going to push that. Oh, and you can see, oh, well, this doesn't exist on the thing. And so let me just follow the instructions. If you remember last time, so I want that to go up there. And that should now be on the remote server. So this fork, come on, there we go. This fork then, here, it even tells you that documentation had recent pushes less than a minute ago. Okay, so you can see where that is. If you wanted to merge that into the main bit, you can actually do compare and pull requests. So you can actually do from here rather than from the command line, the merging of those things in. So it's able to merge. And if you look, we're going to merge into the base repository. So this is CUEH branching at branch face, so that's the original one, and blah, 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 right? So we can see how we do this. Well, I don't want to do that. I want it to merge into CSX239. So this is a merging the branch. That's also fine. If we did want to send this and say, I want this to go back to the master, or let's say another team member I want to send it to, I can go somewhere else. So I might say, instead of here we go. So just turn that back on. Instead of that, I might go to, for example, someone else's, right? So I'm not in a group with all of these people, so I'm not going to go and submit that. I'm going to submit it back to the main version of this. So hold on. No, wait, I'm already on it. Let me show you from a better place. Same thing. I just want to show you that it works across. So here you go. So CSX239 branching at branch face. This is the new one. We've got a documentation branch on there, which has got the updated documentation. See the headings and the bullet points and things like that. Okay, it's very, very simple. If you've not done Markdown before and you want to put the stuff in there, just Google Markdown syntax. It's not worth a big deal in the lecture. If you find any of it difficult, then let us know. I think almost everyone on the module has done tons of Markdown by this point. So you can ask me, Adam, Dan. It doesn't really matter who. We'll be able to point things out for you. But anyway, there it is. And now I want to do this compare and pull request. So what this does is it gives you a nice interface, and I suggest doing this on the web. You can do this stuff from the command line, but I personally just won't touch that because I get so confused about what to refer to, like origin this and all the others, that it just does my head in. I just don't do it. So what I would expect everyone to do, and if you're a Git master, or you're Dan, then by all means, do it from the command line. But please, consider doing it this way first. You pick the base repository that you want to merge into, and you can see it's automatically gone back to being CUEH branching at branch face. So that's the original place that the fork came from, and which branch you want it to go into, and then the repository that you want to get it from. And you can see here that's CSX239 branching at branch face, and it's the documentation fork. Now, like I started at the start, and I sort of went back and wanted to explain, in the full thing. I actually, in this case, just want to merge the documentation part into the master branch for this fork. Okay, so I'm first of all going to put it into my working repositories master, and then at some point I can merge that if I want to into the other one, or you can go directly into the other one. It doesn't matter, to Git which way you do. This is much more about how you and your team want to work. Okay. Let's go with what I said before, which is I want to merge it into here. So it's actually, it's really just a pull request into master the branch from the documentation branch. Okay, and notice it's a request. It's a pull request. Okay, so it's really saying I would like this to happen. I'm going to create a pull request. And there we go. And it says here this branch has no conflicts with the base branch. It's checked that everything is fine, doesn't need anything to be resolved. If it does, then you're going to have more stuff, and you can do merge pull request and click the button, or it will show you how to do stuff on the command line. So the web interface is really, really nice for this because it tells you how these things work. But again, I tend not to do it from the command line because when it comes to this, I like having the visual representation. Okay, so I can from here go to merge pull request. You get to put in a message, so I can leave it as the default. And there we go. And you can see that pull request now has been successfully merged. And so if we go back to the code on here and look at branch master, you'll see that that's now been incorporated. You can see these kind of things get recorded, so you can actually see the history of them. If you go to the insights panel, so you can see there's one here, and do they show? I think they show up in the network. Yeah, I think you can just about see there. There were two little bits. Look, not particularly clear. In GitLab, there's a much better view of this. In fact, let's just quickly switch over because it's kind of nice, I think, to see. Oh, yeah. See what the GitLab for screen key looks like, because that's the one that we that's the thing that I use, which I'm not using now and I've forgotten. But if you look at, where was it, analytics, repository graph, that was it. So I like this visualization, and it's a shame that the other GitHub one doesn't have it. But here, I think it's really nice because you can see the branches come out, so you can see, who made it and what they did. It's not particularly branchy. There are points where it gets quite good, so you can see here you've got multiple people seem to suddenly break things out because you've got this person corrects a bug there, that person does this, and then they get merged back together and merged back in. So it gives you a way to work. So that's just an illustration. This one unfortunately doesn't have the same option, or at least I haven't found it anywhere. If you need to go in and look for the pull request, so if you're working with your team, so for example, as you get through the project and the documentation about how you're going to go about it is up to date, and you're working on your plugins, the thing that you're probably going to want to do then is when you finish the plugin, you're going to want to say to your teammates, right, I've got my plugin X working. Would you like to put a copy into your repository now so that you can run your final master thing, demonstrating that it works with other people's code? Okay, and they go, yeah, great. So you would then submit a pull request to their repository suggesting that they incorporate it, and they can look through what's in there, they can make sure that that's sensible, and then they, in this list of pull requests, they can choose to merge and go in that way. Okay, that's
would it be best for one of the people in the group to effectively have the master and then people branch off of that in your group?
I don't think it's a bad idea to start with as a way to do it, but I wouldn't want to keep only pushing things back to that one person, because if that person goes off sick, gets an extension, gets COVID, or just does a runner and decides to go and study, early 19th century philosophy instead of ethical hacking, then that person's repository is the one that you need to get the stuff from. So and I also think you probably don't want to make other people contributors to your repository necessarily. For me, I would probably say, right, during our group work at the start, we'll work on things and we'll push them back to someone's master, and we'll all fork from that. We'll work on it that way for now. Whoever's going to do the typing up. But when you work on your own code, I would say you probably want to just keep multiple forks and then port the plugins across to them. So that would be my preference. I'm not going to mark people up or down for choosing one way or the other, as long as it's makes sense.
James, we also had a question from earlier. So you did some commands to look at the URL for the path. What was that?
That was a good question. It probably would have been git remote and then get URL.
Okay, so it's git remote get URL origin. Yeah, so I was kind of right. I used git remote -v, but I couldn't remember if it was the same thing.
It might well be. It's
-v just shows everything.
There you go.
All. So,
it's just shorter, so I probably should use that. But it's just habit really. What will tab complete? Because git remote tab complete doesn't give me the -v option. But I mean, probably also we could have just done this and had a look at the detail. There's lots of things that Git can do. I don't use them all the time. I don't think anyone does.
I thought it was a new command for me as well, so hopefully that's answered the question that we had in the feed, though. So.
Brilliant. Anything else that came up during that?
Also, we had any other version control systems like competitors to GitHub, but we covered GitLab, Bitbucket, Launchpad. Anything else you could think of?
Well, there are plenty of those. So I tend to use GitHub, GitLab, and Bitbucket. Those are the ones that I cycle between. But they're all, the web interface is different, and I like GitLab because of those kinds of tweaks that it's got. But they are all using Git.
Yep.
There are other version control systems, right? So Some of them that are still around, that are older, are still there. So I still see people sometimes using Bazaar or Baza, as I like to call it.
really like Baza. I still really like Baza.
It's, I didn't use it enough for it to grow on me. So there's you can almost like plot a timeline of version control systems. So there used to be CVS, and that was kind of it. That was the concurrent versioning system, and that was fine. And then I think that the next thing I used after that, and there's probably others, but like the next big one would have been Subversion.
Yeah.
And Subversion really like knocked it out the park by comparison, because you actually had like that local repository version, or that you can compare to, and it kept everything. When I say local, I mean you could do it remotely, but it would always keep a copy of everything and the changes that happen. So you would have the diffs like CVS used. You'd have a complete copy of all the changes. You'd always be able to roll back, and how complex it got. And that worked really well, and it gave you a lot more commands to like do things like merging and stuff because of that. It was a lot easier to do those things, because essentially you could rebuild didn't need to rebuild each version. Then from there, it sort of moved into a bunch of other things that came out, and that's where you suddenly had like Mercurial and Bazaar, and I think I can't remember. There was another one, and I ended up using a bunch of them, like for different things. And I honestly couldn't really say that I liked one over the other. Not because there's no difference, but because I just wasn't using them in anger enough. I wasn't doing big projects with doing things with lots of developers, and Git, which unless I'm wrong, is actually the one that. What's his Linus Torvalds made for controlling the Linux kernel development. Just sort of took all the best bits and added this idea of having a staging area and a local copy of the repository and the remote origin. And so what you've always got is the stuff I'm doing now. You can then go, right, I'm going to bundle this up and check it in to this. And then you can also commit that stuff in one go to be the thing. So you can kind of bundle stuff up as being added, and you can sort of work on different aspects and branches and all kinds of stuff. You can push them into your local repository, and then you can also make that local repository mirrored with a remote one. But at the same time, you can work a lot just locally. Like you can push it somewhere else if you want to. It doesn't have to stay linked to that remote repository, which adds some complexity in some ways, but for most workflows is kind of you don't notice. So
I definitely prefer the Git workflow. I used Bazaar a lot when I was doing all the Ubuntu dev stuff, and I liked that. But Git is definitely it. Now I look back, it's clunky compared to Git. Let's put it that way.
But I also think that the GitHub idea, this idea that you have like a sensible web interface to your remote repository, I think that's a really powerful thing. So. Because at the same time we used to use like SourceForge, which now is just a horrible, cancerous website. I hate having to go near. It's just full of adverts and trying to get you to download random stuff, and it's just nasty. And there was also Savannah, which was like GitHub, but for not GitHub, like SourceForge, but for GNU projects. So
it was Richard Stallman's own SourceForge, wasn't it?
It was, pretty much, and that was nice. But again, like it was very light on the web interface. It was mostly there just to like put your keys in and that kind of stuff. Maybe you'd have a bit of a web page, but nothing like the visualization or the automation of like merging and stuff that you get now. It's like it's so much nicer. This thing where you go, oh yeah, I can merge those. You probably want me to do this. Is that what you want? If not, here are some other options. Or would you like to do this from the command line? This is how that's done. It's like it educates you at the same time. It's so supportive. Okay, so that's that part. I wanted to do a little bit around user interaction, and again, like I said at the start, this is not meant to be exhaustive. This is also not meant to be something that you go, right, James did it exactly like this, therefore I follow what James did. This is like a tour of some of the things that I think you might want to think about around user interaction for the project. So it's like small scale stuff. We'll formalize this a lot more when we do like GUIs and stuff next year. We'll do more full-on user interactive stuff. But for now, there's still times that you need to interact. Now, I'm going to start with the one that you all know because you almost certainly used it. You've seen me use it, and that is input. Okay, so like this, enter your name, and what this does, if you can spell, which is definitely not a given for me today. You can see here A equals input, enter your name, so you give it a prompt. It then prints that out and the user can type something in, and whatever they type in gets put into A. And if you remember, this is always a string in Python 3. If you're using Python 2, so 2.7 or below, firstly, try not to, because it is end of life. You should really have moved to Python 3 now. But the biggest thing you've got to be aware of in there, apart from brackets around prints, is that input does something different. Okay, so in earlier versions of Python, input would actually take something in and evaluate it. So if I've got Python 2.7 on here, just to give you a demo, yeah, I do. Enter a number, I do this, and A contains 1. Looks very similar. Before it was a thing, but if I said enter your name, it breaks. And the reason is it's trying to evaluate it as if it was some actual value in Python. So if I wanted to do this, I would have to type it like this. Okay. Now A contains James. And the problem is that to do that, what it does is it evaluates what's there. So let's say
I could do it for you.
No, not your
remotely.
Way. No, not your way, Dan. So Dan's been working on a way to exploit these kinds of things without having to do the imports and stuff, which I've quickly just done an import to represent the kind of thing that might well be already imported in your code, because it's an easy way for me to demonstrate why this was a bad idea. So enter your name can become
who am I?
Yeah. Oops. It executes the code that I've just given it. Okay, and there you go. You can see, the stuff that's in there, including. And I was very confused about this. I forgot that I made this as part of this class somewhere near the start. So my visual login thing wasn't defaulting to student, and it was defaulting to Alice McTarget person. I'm like, who on earth is Alice McTarget person? But yeah, she's there. She was intentional. I had a bit of a panic, but it's okay. So that's the first thing, and the reason I bring it up is for 2 reasons. One, you can use input safely, but the other one is that if you actually enter something that you want to be a number, string, okay? So you'll need to be able to convert the stuff. And this is the point where you have to start thinking about what a user types in. For a lot of what you're doing, if you're talking to a user and it's like it's a tool, it's being developed by you for hackers, for pen testers, you might not have quite the same worry about sanitization as you would if it was for everyone. Okay, so if it was for everyone to use, there's a good chance they're going to type the wrong thing in just by accident. Or if it's for everyone to use, you might find that someone is going to maliciously try and insert the wrong things. So you kind of got to decide how much sanitization makes sense. So for example, I could just do int A and I get 12, okay? But if the user, because they were dumb, did like 12 exclamation mark, okay, because I really wanted 12, then int A is going to break. Okay, now you can solve this quite easily. You just check, see what's in there. You make sure that all of the things are digits and so on. But in many cases, you maybe don't even want to worry about that. You can just sort of tell people you type this in, and if you type the wrong thing, it's going to break. So you have to decide where along that line it is. As a hint, I would prefer it if things are checked before conversion. We haven't really done much of the exceptions because it's one of those topics that is a little bit complex. But you can also do it with exceptions if you want to have a look at those. It's not a requirement. But If you accept input and you want to do something with it, and that input is not from a trusted source, then you're going to have to do a lot more. Okay, now what I would suggest with that is you look at sanitization libraries, which you have, you might have noticed, but you've seen me use already. So Python input sanitization. Okay. And there we go. So you've got libraries. So if you go to places like this, PyPy, it's the package lists for Python. So there are packages like sanitize, and it will explain what it is. It's not really rendered the example very well, to be honest, but you can see here from sanitize import HTML, and you put some HTML in there, and it makes sure that this is made into safe things to go through. There you go, home page. Move to GitHub. There we go. The better documentation. So you can see here you got sanitize HTML. You put in safe, and then you put a meta tag in, and it removes everything else. So if you're worried about people doing things that might go to the web and having injection that way, you can do that. Oh, that is the read news now, of course. There's a lot of it. Okay, so why is that important? The reason I'm showing you this is because if you're going to do sanitization, you don't really want to have to regenerate that every single time you do something. Okay, there are libraries out there that are being tested and used quite a lot, and so it makes sense to make the most of them. There are others. I mean, have a look, because depending on what you're doing, it might change things. So if sanitize only just HTML, but you're going to use SQL to do stuff, that's one thing. If it's about file names, you might want to look at, and this is where you'll see me use this sanitize file name. So this takes out anything that might end up being dangerous, like things that would adjust the path, that can be really problematic. So just bear that in mind, that you will need to think about where data comes from and what you're going to do with it, and make sure that something that is potentially dangerous can be taken out. If you think that for some things there is a danger, but the person that's using this is in control and it's their system, or it's their target system, you might decide that actually the documentation says if you do these things, the output is going to be up to you. I mean, if you want to try and abuse it, you can do, because we don't want to stop you from doing alternative things, but it's not guaranteed to work. That's also an option depending on what it is that you do. So just bear that bit in mind. Another thing I wanted to show you, and it's something that you've already seen again, but I want you to look into if you decide it's useful, and certainly for the later tasks in the coursework, it would be a great way to go about doing it, is the processing arguments from the command line. Okay, so when we run stuff in Python, I think I've talked about this already, but what people type on the end. So if you type ls and ls minus l and ls minus l minus a, or ls minus la, they all sort of change the way things work. ls minus l minus a and ls minus la actually do the same thing, and this is a useful way to put stuff in. So we can even put a path in there, tell it where we want to look. And in Python, the way that we get hold of that is through the sys.argv variable. So let me just get this up and running.
James, if possible, can you zoom in, please?
Oh yeah, of course I can.
Thank you.
Is that clear?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. I when I'm not doing this, I zoom out so that when I've got my screen split this way, I get two 80-column windows so they don't wrap. So I have to keep remembering to zoom back in again afterwards. So. Okay, so import sys, and then I can do, let's just do print sys.argv for now. Okay, really simple program. So argv is a list of the things that were given on the command line. So let's go. Without anything.
Sorry, James. Did you want to put on the screen keyboard as well? People are asking what buttons you're using for splitting the screen.
Ah, okay. I will go back and resplit the screen just to demonstrate. So it is Control X3 to split vertically, Control X1 to go back to this one thing. So let's say here, if I want in this buffer on the left, and I want it to be the only one, as in no more splits, Control X1. I'm just going to split it again. And if I wanted to say I'm in this one over here, but I want this one deleted, Control X0. Okay, so 3 splits that way, 2 splits that way, and you can actually do this as many times as you want. And then Control XO will cycle you through the different places. So 2, 3, 2, 3, whatever, however you want to do it. So if I'm in here and I want this to be the only one, then I just do Control X1. But if I'm in somewhere like here and I want this to be gone, Control X0 will get rid of it, so it undivides, and then I'm going to do Control X1 to go back to a single thing. Hopefully that if anyone has actually been picking up Emacs as we've been going along, I hope that's useful. And since we're at it, what I don't do very often is Control X5 2, which actually creates a completely new frame that you can put the stuff in, and Control X5O will actually switch between them, so you can have multiple like runnings of Emacs like this, and so you might even have one say on another window like that running somewhere. And let's say I open a file in this one. I'm typing all that. My bash history, something like that. So you can see a bunch of random stuff in here. Like that. You can also switch buffers in here. They're actually the same version of Emacs. So if you look in here, it's the same list of buffers that the other one has. And then Control X50 will get rid of that. So it deletes the frame. And you can have as many frames as you want. Okay, that's the aside for Emacs for today. What are we actually doing? We were going to run, oh yeah, that was it. So we're going to run in. So pd tmp. So on its own, you can see that list, sys.argv, if you remember what we were doing. Here it is. Over here, you can see the name of the thing itself is the first item in that list. And if I put other things in, they all become items in there. Okay. So you can see, whatever I put in, they all slot into one of those. So I could just go through that list, and quite often you'll see people do things like, if you want to process multiple files, for example, you could say, if len sys.argv is less than or equal to 1, it shouldn't really ever be less than 1. I don't know how that would happen, but just in case, then you print usage argv 0 like that. And then you can do sys.exit. So that just quits your program, just exit, and non-zero in here. So anything other than 0 means it's exiting because something went wrong rather than because it went right. So we can do that. Let's just say that. So in.py and sorry, got my bracket in the wrong place. Weird. Do that again. So you can see that works fine. If I try and do it without anything on there afterwards, it says usage./in.py file name. Why did I not just type INN.py in there? Why did I use this when we know what the file's called? Does anyone have any idea? Other than Adam and Dan.
Does it search for it?
No, not quite. It tells you what the file is actually called. The reason is, or actually, let's say copy. Okay. If I've got it as a different name, the documentation still works. Whereas if I'd written in.py in there and then later it changes, it wouldn't. And that might seem like a really small thing, but I'm getting three installed here. Someone's clattering about. So we've got, say, a link. So let's say this is a symlink. So we're going to go in.py, foo.py, and now you can see I've got foo.py and in.py. If I do ls-l,
Rahim, could you mute, please?
That boo is actually symlink to in, which means I can do I keep ending up with my numlock going off. Run it this way, or I can run it this way, and it doesn't really matter. So I can have it symlinked even. So it's the same source file, but with two names. Okay. Right. So that's one of the things that we can do, and then we could go through. So we could say for I in sys.argv1 onwards. So that takes everything upwards. If you remember our array slice notation or list slicing notation, you've got this starting point, ending point. One is the second item in, so it's skipping the 0 one. And when we don't give it another number, so we would put a number in there if we wanted to, it will go up to the end. We can then do okay. Now I haven't actually deleted everything in it, so that would be a very bad thing to do. But look what I typed. /x star, right? And the shell goes, oh, you want all of those things, and puts them in here for us. Okay, so it actually gives us a way to easily do those things. So that's handy. The problem is, if I wanted to do like -l, -a, and everything else, then it starts to become really tricky, because I'm going to go through, well, you know, it's not necessarily the first one. And I could do this, or I could even do that, or I could do, you know, I could do this. That can be in any order, and it needs to know, yeah, they all mean the same thing. How do I write that code? Well, you're gonna have to go, well, let me check through. Does it have a minus at the start? If it does, is it which one? What letters follow it? You know, what do they do? Does it not have a minus at the start? In that case, it's probably going to be a file name. So do I check? How do I check that? It gets very, very complicated. So what you would do is you would use something that helps you to process those things. There are actually multiple ways to do it. One of the simplest ones I found you've actually already been using. It's in Exfiltrator. Let me just go and find it for you. Bob. So if you did any of the more advanced tasks, you might well have come across this, and this is how it's being used. So opt parse, and then option parser is the class inside. So the reason I've done that is because, you know, I'm not going to have any other things called option parser. If I don't use the from thing, but just do import opt parse, I would then have to do opt parse dot option parser in here. Okay, same difference. So what do we do? First thing, let me zoom in. So the first thing we're going to do, just get rid of these for a bit. That is just a string, so it's just saying about how we're going to use it, and you can see it's got the %prog for the program name in there, and then we create a parser object, okay, and you give it the usage string. So I could have written the string in there if I wanted to, but I put it into a variable and then passed it in. Then you parser.add option, so this parser object that I've made, this one here, that's that, add option, and then we say, right, I want to add in this thing which has got this short name, this long name, this is the variable or the configuration item that I go into, this is the help string, okay. These things are a little bit more complicated. You can look up how some of these metavars work. It's not worth explaining. You probably won't need them for this. If you do, have a look. I'll show you the documentation shortly, and then you can give it a default, okay. And you've got the same thing for these things down here, okay. So they all add up. You can put them all in, and then at the end you can say options and arguments is equal to parser.parseargs, and now args is going to be equal to all the things that aren't those options up here. So if you've got file names and stuff like that, you can put them in there, no problem. And you can easily, so let's say we looked at file name. Later on, you want to know what the file name is. Well, options.filename is that file name. And if the user didn't give you one, because we set a default, it's going to be whatever the default was, okay? So, you can have a look at this. If you haven't noticed before, when you go to the Python documentation, you can actually pick which version of Python you're looking at. So it is useful because sometimes these things change. It's useful to know what version you're actually using. So I'm using 3.8 here. So I will make sure that I'm looking at the 3.8 version of documentation in case anything changes. Okay, so here's an example. So you can always get them from here as well if you wanted to go through. And this is where that metavar bit comes in. All right, so just to show you where it is, it's how it shows up in that bit of documentation help. All right, there's a tutorial with this, which is actually really good. And if you're going to use it, and I hope many of you do, go through this tutorial. It really is quite good at explaining how this stuff works. You don't have to do all the complex stuff. Yeah, you've got groupings of options. Yeah, you can do loads of really cool stuff with it. So have a look and see. You've also got the reference at the bottom. So if you're doing command line input, as in things that go as arguments to a command line, then absolutely use this or one of the others. There are third-party things out there. This one's built in with Python, but there are others out there that will give you different kind of controls, different things you can do. So have a look at those things. The other thing that you can do for user input is menus, right? Now this is something that you kind of see a lot in command line tools, and I think for this project is particularly useful. So actually giving you some code already that does this. So down here, I've got a really basic menu system. Okay, I'll show you how it works. So we have a should quit variable, so it's false. And while not should quit, then what we do is we print out a little line. Logo goes here, title, and then we print out a bunch of things that we want the user to have as options. So I've gone through a list of things to print them out and given them a menu, so it's literally one thing per line. I've used loops. If you've got custom things that don't work in loops, you can always just print each line out and queue to quit. I've then used input here to get them to type something in, and then I've stripped any white space. So if the user types, queue and then a space, it actually just removes the spaces, so it's easier for comparison. And I also made everything uppercase because I didn't have any reason to use upper or lower for particular things. And then we check, did they type a queue? If so, then should quit becomes equal to true, and when we go back in the loop, it will quit. If it wasn't that, it then checks other things. So it checks to see, Did they start it off with a P or an E? And is the length of it greater than 1? If that's the case, it strips those things out and works out what number you put in and uses that to launch a, in this case, to launch a privilege escalation or something, right? So let's show that in action. Activate the while in bash. Oh, because I'm writing, I'm still doing it. Right, okay. I was playing with it there, so ignore that. This is what it would look like. Source. I'm in source. Okay, so in that case, just leave it. There we go. So it's only got one thing. That's a dumb SU do escalation, and I'm going to select it by typing in P0, and then it gives you some information. It tells you who wrote it, and it tells you, what it is. It's going to use the SU-do hack, which is not really a hack at all. It's literally just going to try and use SU-do. If you want to execute it, you have to type in yes in capital letters because you don't want to accidentally launch things, and then it does it. And the way this works, it is really simple. It just puts the commands that it wants to use into a temporary folder, gives you a shell, and goes, right, go. And when you've done it, you can quit this shell. It'll go back to the menu, and it will delete the temporary file. The reason for doing this is it's quite a fraught process sometimes trying to get command line options out to a shell. And so I've given you a function that will do this as the the fallback option for anything that you can't get to work another way. So no matter how complex your stuff gets, generally this would be able to execute it. For many things you won't need to. If you want to do enumeration by getting the contents of the password file, you don't need to be this complicated. You can use os.system, not a problem. But this is here just to show you that some of the more complicated ones can still be done. So it will have made a temporary directory. It does that automatically. You can then run the things, and as you can see, you actually do need to know the password. So it's not much of a hack. And what it does, I've just decided that this shell is going to be launched by X as an X-term. So there you go. Who am I? You could possibly just about see. It's very small text, but this is popped up an X-term as root. Okay. So like I said, not a particularly useful one because it uses SU-do and you need to know the password. So it's really only doing things you do have privileges for, but it's there as a dummy. And when you quit the shell, you go back to the menu. Right. So I did this, and it's there as a really simple example. However, once you get to anything more complex, it starts to become a right pain to start building your menus. And again, this is something that people do all of the time. You're always having to build menus. Okay, so one of the things that you can do is you can use other libraries for this. There are plenty of menu libraries for Python. Use the one that you like the look of. If you want to go and have a look through them. If you want to use something that I suggest, which is fairly straightforward to use and has enough features for most of what you want, the one I like is console menu. So here it is. You've got an example here. So you can see you installed it with pip. So I'm going to just take this example and go over into the Leap project source code. I'm going to make a thing called menu demo.py, paste that stuff in. And you can see from console menu to this, blah, blah, blah. Now, remember, we have to install this. Okay, so what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to go into the requirements file and I'm going to put console menu over here. I'm then going to make prereqs so that we can update the installed packages inside this virtual environment. Yeah,
James,
all the things we did before.
Just a quick question: is it overkill to think maybe a consideration of? I mean, not something I'm going to do anyway, but like a basic GUI interface.
For this, it is definitely overkill, and actually probably not that useful because very often for this kind of stuff, you're going to be working remotely. So unless you're either physically located or have got X forwarding through a tunnel, you're not going to be able to use a GUI anyway in actual use. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with GUIs, but in this case, I'm imagining that what you would do is you would get like a shell on something. You would load this program in, run it, so upload it somehow, with that file include, or pipe it over your netcat connection, however you've got connected, and then you'd use it to automate the process of doing enumeration and privilege escalation. What you wouldn't be doing is running it on a machine that you're sitting in front of. Right. So anyway, let's have a look at this menu demo now. So Python menu demo, and look, you've got menu item 1, call a Python function, so you get to do something there. You can get submenus, so item 1 or submenu, and you can quit from the submenu without calling something, and you go and exit. And that's really quite nice, and that's quite a nice setup. If we look at the code to do it, you can see menu equals console menu. You put your title in.
That's so clean. I've never seen that.
It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can make menu items, so it could be, take the function item out. Take those ones out. Take that one out as well. Just
Is it only Linux compatible, James?
No, it's cross-platform. It's quite nice. So here I'm going to put enumerations, and actually, let's take. Oh no, where's the function? Right. So I'm going to do a quick demo of how you would put these things in. So menu item as the base thing is not that useful, but what you can do is you can replace it with a function item, and then you can tell it what these things need to have to run. So I'm going to say launch attack, and then just above write the function. And so you literally say, when you do this, call that function. Okay. I'm going to make a couple more of those because I'm going to put them in the sub menu as well. Get rid of a bunch of these. So So here I'm doing something where I'm going to pass in a parameter to the function as well, just to give you a demo of that. So enum stuff you can see there we've got a function called enum stuff, which takes a number. If the number's 1, it does one thing. If it's 2, it does another. If it's anything else, it says it's not implemented. And here I'm saying, when you pick this menu item, I want you to run that function with this series of data. Now it's a list of only one item, but if there's more, we'd put it in there. I'm pretty sure that's how it goes. In fact, I've deleted an example that had one in. Yeah, it's exactly like that. Okay, so it's a list of things. And then on the sub menu, we can give it the list of things that we want. So submenu item, they've said selection menu and menu. Which one was menu? Menu's top one. Oh, so I suppose that'll be going back to the main menu as well, won't it? So we want to put in new enum 1, enum 2, menu. I can't remember whether these should be a list. We'll work that out in a minute. So we add those two things. Let's try it. So we have attack and we have submenu. There we go. So we'll get this one right. Submenu. So we're just looking at the docs. Submenu item. We need to things. Okay. Okay. So that's a submenu item, which is reading one, and we need another one. No, that doesn't seem right. Submenu items can have more than one. I misunderstood something here. Yeah, give me a second. On that one, submenu item. Takes an item and right, let's have a look. Forgot to do that as well, just to make it a bit clearer. So we've got function item. That's fine. I'll tell you what, let's before we do that, let's just test that works. That'll be the easiest one. Menu.append enum one. So that it actually okay. There we go. So what happens when I try and talk and write code at the same time. So I called this which enum and then instantly next line in called it something else. So clearly a bit of a problem there. So 2 and 1. So what are we missing to get the to actually run? Show the menu. Probably it's just a matter of having some delay. Happening very quickly. So let's just check that. 1, attacking, pressing to continue. 2, winning a new issue. 1, pressing to continue. And 3 should exit. So now submenus. Right, so now fix that. Hopefully this all makes a lot more sense. So we have a submenu item. Add a menu.
Somebody's got an idea about the selection menu thing that should be created. Shouldn't that be created to so the document knows that the items are defined?
I didn't understand I didn't understand. Sorry.
That's okay. So shouldn't the submenu item be created so that the document knows each of the parts that's supposed to be going into the submenu?
Yes. Oh, that's the thing. So at the moment I'm adding just enum1, which is a menu item to it.
Oh, sorry, the selection menu. That's what I meant. I didn't mean submenu item. I meant selection
okay.
menu.
Well, the selection menu was in the previous example, but that, as far as I understood, selection menu was just because it selects item 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
And then has the other one. So we need to make, that's it. So we need to make a menu and then we put the stuff in there. So menu item should be enum menu That's one item. I think what we need to do is make the sub-menu. That's what we need to do. So this menu is going to be do. And we can just look at the documentation. So sub-menu item. Right, sub-menu item. Okay. Sub-menu. Console menu. I've done that. They're going to be in a sub components. Hold on. Come on. After that, items. There we go.
Interesting side effect of your menu locking and the keyboard being displayed.
Yes. This is why I stick with the default password. So the number of times the hash has been on the screen and things like that, it's nice to know that this is a junk VM that is not going to get anyone into trouble. Right, so let's do that again. Submenu. There we go. So it is the submenu, menu, and should exit. So it's the submenu to be opened when this is done. Right. Okay, that makes sense. So the submenu item is going to open the enum menu. It's not the items, and we don't need to give it that. And so we should be able to put the submenu item on there. And so enum menu, where it goes, and enum menu dot append item enum1. Let's try it now. So 1 attack, 2 gives us enum1 or enum beta, and 3 there, and then 3 to quit out the whole thing. So the confusion was, my confusion was, you actually make an enum menu, like you make a sub menu, which is just a menu. You put your items into it, and then you make a sub menu item, which takes that and puts it into the main menu. Okay, so you can see the sub menu item. So when this is clicked, it goes into there. What's it actually called? It? Yes, sub menu item. So really, well, that's called enumerations. That's what's displayed in the thing. So we should really call that enumerations. Oh, there we go. And then you get that menu. So exit from there takes you back. So this is really quite nice. So if you look at, take some of these comments out, if you look at what it actually took for us to do, it's this, which is I can't think of this being much shorter for the kind of power that you get for building menus. Okay, that was sort of all of the stuff I wanted to go over with the interaction. Does anyone have any questions?
Honestly, right now we're mostly talking about how we can help to fix it, and then not managing to quite do it.
It's all right. That was a completely scripted exploration of how to go about. Yeah, totally scripted. A demonstration of how you would go about looking up documentation and get things right. It's honestly, that was probably the most realistic demo of programming you've had on the module so far. It's like, wait a minute, what's going on? Let me go and look at the documentation, and seeing all the different ways that you can go and find things out. And even, tactics are like, well, hold on, let's try this with the simplest possible case first, and then build up from there, because clearly I made an assumption that was incorrect. So.
Yeah. And we've said it before as well to you guys, like, we make mistakes too. Like, programming is not an exact science. You don't just walk up to a console and write this stuff and it all just magically works first time most of the time. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
you didn't get more proof of that than today.
Exactly. So Omar's good idea. So in summary, what we've done in this interactive part is we looked at how we get input from a user, some of the ways that you can sanitize that, and just sort of thinking about why and the differences that in usage. We looked at how command line stuff gets into Python, so the arguments that you give on the command line, and then how we might make quite complex sets of options without having to write lots of code ourselves, and we do that by using the optparse library. Then we looked at menus. And we looked in the menus for, first of all, how would we write them by hand? And you can see the little one that I wrote and just how much code that took to write a little one. And then I pointed you towards what I would actually have used if I wasn't giving you the option of, improving your system by using it yourself, the console menu library. Okay.
Adam had a really good link that has switch cases for making menus in Python. Which I thought I would resend, so that should just be turning up there. And Mattia, for the menu, I mean, if you're already editing an existing one, then it probably takes more work than writing your own in some ways. But as long as it's still your own menu, I guess it's still your own code.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you look at what I did, I started with the example code and modified it from there. That wouldn't be considered to be plagiarism or cheating at all, because it was just an easy way for me to get the syntax in there. There's nothing really left of the original other than the names that we pick for things. So it's going to be called menu item, but it's going to be called that whether you write it by hand or whether you copy and paste from there. So that's all that was left. Wajid, it's all related to coursework. So today's important stuff and useful things, but definitely coursework related, in the sense that these are things that you might want to use. You have an open-ended task a little bit for this one, but I'm sort of giving you pointers to stuff that I would recommend looking at. Okay, if there are no other questions, what I'm going to suggest that we do is we take a break. So it's currently just before 10 to 2. If we take a break, we say on 2, we will come back and we will go over the coursework and what you're going to be doing with that. Yep.
James, can we also have about 5 minutes at the end just for some question and answers regarding groups, what we can do, what's allowed, and that kind of stuff?
There'll be plenty of time. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over the coursework, which is not going to take very long. Okay, there's a lot less code for you this time. You're going to be working a lot more on your own or in your groups. So there's a lot less to explain. It's more about setting the scene and giving you some idea. And so we'll have loads of time for questions. I'm expecting really that I'm going to say, right, go and have a look, and I'll be here for questions. So, okay. Raheem, you can. The only thing is, I've got sessions until much later. So what I suggest is perhaps when we get to the question and answer bit later, if there's time, which there almost certainly will be, perhaps what we do is I will just pull you into a private chat on here before the end of the session, because otherwise you're going to wait until much later, and it's been rather a manic day. I haven't really had a chance to stop for anything yet, so it would probably be easier to do that, and certainly for me, it would be better to do it now rather than add another half an hour on the end of the day, which has already gone on since 7 o'clock this morning, trying to get cover for someone else's session and all sorts of things. Is that all right?
Remember, there's also a lot of things that I can do as well, guys. So, like, you know, it's always worth floating your questions by me, because, you know, James is super busy.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's just today's just been one of those days. Yeah,
one of those. Yeah.
People, you know, off sick, people have COVID, and yes, I've covered other sessions and sorted out materials for people. So it's just been a bit manic. Hence the paper read me rather than the full one. So the point of the things, Faisal, you come to the session, right? I mean, you just come and have a chat. It's just so that you've got someone to talk to. So I run it every week, and I'm first years of my least good at attending. I can't remember when I've had more than one of them turn up to the personal tutorial. I'm always there, so there in every bit. But you know, not everyone comes in. It's not compulsory. You've got all the material that you need to go through, so you feel free to go through it. If you look through it all and you think, actually, this all makes sense, I don't need to talk to James about that, not a problem. If you think, oh, actually, I would like to discuss this because I'm not really sure, you know, what I do with this or how I can get the most out of it, then by all means come and speak to me. Or you might think of something that's nothing at all to do with the material that you've been linked to about personal tutorials, but seems like a personal tutorial type of thing. That's also the kind of thing that I would talk to. So that could be, you know, maybe stuff about careers. It could be about, you know, ideas you've had for stuff, or, you know, questions about cybersecurity. It doesn't have to be the stuff that's written in. So, Faisal, if I see you, and that's great. I'll always be there for those scheduled sessions. If for some reason I can't, I will make sure that you get notification. But I'm actually not going to chase you or tell you off if you don't. Is that fair? Thanks, Nav. Although the way someone said this to me the other day, it's like, you know, maybe they should pay me for the time I spend on something talking to them. I just point out that you're paid to be at university, so you already are. Don't worry.
I thought I'd contribute that link just because Python, as you know, doesn't have built-in switch cases, and I think that there are useful scenarios where that is relevant.
Yes.
And I thought these are the ways to sort of get around that concept of inbuilt switch cases that it unfortunately doesn't have. And I think it might be useful for some people.
Yes, I think to be honest, I don't think it misses a switch. I think things like this, having, you know, function references inside a dictionary and using them in this way, I think is actually a lot more powerful, really. You know, if you need to do this, this is a much more extensible way, because the problem with switch is it's really just syntactic sugar for a bunch of if statements anyway. You know, it's not.
It is a much more organized way of doing things, if you ask me. But
I think syntactically it looks a little bit better, but it's not really functionally different. It's not really even that much more difficult to read. But what I think you gain by having things like dictionaries and function point, well, we don't need to call them function pointers, but functions reference from inside there, is so much more than you lost by not having switch in the first place. So, you know, being able to collect up those things, change them, for example, you know, like you actually pass that, you could pass that dictionary of functions to another object. It could be modified. You could extend it as you go through. None of you could do.
I was literally just thinking that you could add things onto the dictionary, and you've just added extra functionality directly to the code.
Exactly. And in many ways, that's how Python actually implements objects. So that there's a sort of generic object, and that has a dictionary of things it contains. I'm going to see if I can show you, but actually I'm not entirely sure in Python 3 whether it's as visible. Might be more visible, actually. So let's say, I don't know, we'll try to make an object of.
Do a tuple.
Yeah, do a tuple. I was going to say, I think I've got stuff that I can. Yeah, let's do it. No, I know. Concentrator. So remember we did the collector thing. So if I do Python 3 import collector, C equals collector dot collector, So we have this collector object, and we can do dirc, and we can see all the stuff that's in there. Can we see the? Yeah, we can. Right. So this dict here should be. There we go. It is the contents of the stuff that's in there. Okay, so you've got all the different bits and pieces. It doesn't have the functions in though, does it? I thought it should.
Doesn't dir gives you the functions?
Yeah, but where's dir getting them from?
That's information. So dir.
Do you see what I mean? Dict is actually where dir. I thought dir got its information to show you. Or is it? Or you mean the dir? Yeah, that is just a function that returns it rather than actual references. Interesting the way it shows them in different order though. Didn't notice that before. Hold on. I think I know why. Right, so because let's see. C underscore C double underscore dict is a dictionary. And inside there are the data items that relate to the object, okay? And its class one is this, and if we do it there,
yep,
then we've got the functions, right? So append is a function. So what we would do is we would go, right, the dictionary of the class has a key append, which is a function, and that we would just pass into its C and whatever we want to append in order to do it. So there we go. So we actually, if you look, we took you've got the dict for the stuff itself, so we could actually also go C dot dict. So you can actually access all of these things as almost like dictionaries. So they're programmable in that sense. You can be really dynamic in the way that you access these things, which is the rabbit hole that Dan's been going down in some ways.
Say, if you do c.class, you're going to have to do the dunders for me, and then dot bases again with 2 underscores. So if you hit that, just hit enter there. So this is giving you the class. So everything in Python inherits from class object. So no, you need to, because it's a tuple. So do .0.
Is that all?
So do it as array. Yep, 0, and then you
right. So it's a tuple. Okay.
And then dict might work.
There we go.
Which is really cool.
So this is the stuff that everything else inherits from.
Yep.
In Python, and again,
and then if you
what it actually is a dictionary.
Yep. If you change dict to subclasses, you'll be able to see all of the built-in classes that inherit from object. Again, so now you're going to get lots and lots of stuff, right? So this is everything that's built into Python as the base classes, which is really cool, right? And then if you want, so you need to instantiate it. So do the normal brackets, parenthesis, and then square brackets.
Oh right. So
now you can pull one out.
A function call. Okay.
So if you do -1, this is a cool trick, right? So -1 is get text.
Yeah.
Right. Now if you want to hide something, if you do -1.foo or whatever, let's call it evil, -1.evil. So evil, yep, right, equals foo.
Oh, okay, to put something in there.
And you can, if you're lucky, so now you've stashed the string foo inside the global for what's -1, null transitions.
Yeah.
No translations, and then you can get it back out later. Right, so it's proper cool stuff. Proper cool stuff.
Let's find.
Wait, so are you saying that you can basically stash data within the source code of Python, sort of thing?
Ish. So what we've got is we've gone up to the main class of objects, and all of these things are that might not work because if you have a look, so foo doesn't, so int doesn't have the set-attr method.
Set-attr, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
whereas,
but hold on,
so
hold on.
Mileage may vary with the things that you're putting in. No, so there we go. It's not the right object type, but it's really quite cool that you can start pulling stuff out. Because then, again, you've got some of the built-ins back there. If you killed all the built-ins, then they disappear, but you can still reconstruct them. It's really interesting to visualize. Well, to me, it's really interesting to visualize what's happening with Python's internals itself,
exactly.
So you can see everything of this class of objects and how it all comes back down again.
So what I actually wanted to point out, and we've got to right around the houses in a fun way to get there. What I was actually going to say was C dot append with some data looks like, okay, we've got an object and we've got some stuff, but actually all it's really doing is it's looking in C and then say, well, okay, this is a function, so we need to look at the class, and then that class is going to have a dictionary, and inside that dictionary is going to be all of the things that belong to the class, and the functions all belong to the class, which is why we have to put self as the first item, and out of that we want to append, and then we can actually call that function, so we can do that with C itself, and the data that we want to add into there could be something completely different. And so really that C dot something is looking up where to get that function reference from in this way. So C dot append didn't require the self part at the start, but when we call it without this helpful translation from that into this, we have to actually tell it, okay, so call this function, which is a function that's in this dictionary that belongs to this object, and we need to pass it an object reference to work on, and that's why that self is always there. So what you're seeing is the internals, like Dan says.
Just out of interest, make D as a collector. I've had a thought. Now hit up twice, but change self to D. Can we change? Can we? I don't. Oh.
That's exactly how it works.
Cool. So yeah, the self is the reference to the object that we're dealing with, and awesome.
That's it. So this bit here is really just how we got to the class. Yeah. It doesn't really matter. In fact,
that's the trick that I was using for that jail escape thing. Is it doesn't matter where it comes from, as we can still call the functions.
We can even do it this way.
Yeah.
So we didn't need to use C as a starting point. We can go straight to the collector class, get its dictionary, find the function that we want in there, run that function, but apply something else to it. So, I mean, if you're really intent on doing unfathomably odd things, you could pass into that something that's not actually an instance of this.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, oh God, right. For example, we could make something else. So let's say we make I don't know. Let's do it with a byte string. It's probably going to be so. So I need data. Oh, can I have it right? No. I need something that I can actually monkey with.
What could you call? Because appends something to data, so you'd need an object with data inside of it, wouldn't you?
There's a way to make a blank object, isn't there?
Not
something you need to do very often unless you're Dan. What?
Just for comments, but sorry.
What in Teams?
Yeah.
Have we? This is break time, everyone. Just to be clear. Oh no, we're actually 4 minutes over. But anyway, we're just going to finish this bit because this is interesting. So I've managed to make a sort of an anonymous object, if you like. So T is now a spanner object, and there's no such thing as a spanner object, which is hilarious. But I should be able to say T.data equals something, and I want to make it a byte string, I think. So T is there, and C also has a decoder, so I'm going to say T.decoder equals lambda x, and now I think I can do something awful. I don't know why I'm enjoying this so much, doing terrible things. Yeah. So I can pass in. There you go. But so you can give it stuff that's not the right type inside the things that are actually from the class. So anyway.
This is the awesome stuff, but it's really, really cool how you can mangle and just, look at what's going on with the internals and make it work. Really, really good stuff. Love it. Love doing this sort of stuff.
Yes. And anyone that didn't like that was all Adam's fault.
Yeah.
He asked a sensible question and didn't think about how much of a tangent Dan and I might go off on. So just be warned.
Can you do one thing?
I was thinking it was a bit of a tangent to go from sort of dictionary switch cases to that.
It's because those dictionary things, that's literally how objects are made. Like it's part of how it works. Sorry, Dan, you can say try something.
You've got a blue flashing thing at the bottom of your screen.
Oh,
it's driving me insane, right? Because now I've noticed it won't go away.
It's for some reason this terminal doesn't always realise when it's focused, and it's trying to tell me that something's happened in there. Well, I know something's happened because it's me that happened.
Yeah.
But there you go, it's gone now.
Good. Thank you. It was driving me mad, man.
I have no idea what's going on. Beard ambassador for you. I'm going to assume that was not meant for me. Right. So coursework. Hopefully everyone's back. And if you stayed, I hope that wasn't too weird a tangent to go on. So we're going to look at the coursework. Right. First of all, going onto the web. Here is Leap. It has documentation here, so I'm going to go through this stuff with you, and there is more documentation because you've also got some stuff that's in the GitHub pages. So, assessment coursework 2 explains, roughly what's expected. Notice the word limit goes up with the size of the credits. This is worth twice as much as the first one. One's worth 10 credits, one's worth 20 credits. And it explains the kinds of things that you expect it to do. You expect it in doing some group working, and it explains the marking scheme, which you can see what these things are. Again, it's the same sorts of things, but the weightings are a little bit different. Okay, so in this one, you get more for the team software development, which is the new part, and repository organisation is worth a little bit more as well.
Could you put a link to that in the chat, please?
Adam, do you mind getting the link? It's all from Aula. It's all from that main page. So the main page we've all been using all the way through. It's all on there. But
okay, thank you.
And then also you have the page in the project list, okay, which has more detail on the basic, intermediate, and that kind of stuff. Right. So what are we doing? Leap is the idea is that you're going to build a tool for doing local enumeration and privilege escalation, or privesc, right? That's why I managed to make it Leap, not Leapy. So what does that mean? You want to build something that does the scanning for you when you're trying to compromise a box, right? So let's say you're doing a pen test. You're going to find a foothold on a remote machine. Could be through, actually just having credentials. It could be through, some sort of, actual vulnerability that you've exploited. But you get there, and the next thing you do is you go, right, what information is this giving me? And can I increase my privileges? Right, that's the two main things that you tend to do before you go on to anything else. So after that, you might look for, can I do sideways movements? So can I, pivot from here into other bits of the larger network and so on. But to start with, you're mostly looking at what information you can gather, which is very useful, and also can I increase privileges. So gathering information, there are actually a bunch of scripts out there that are really useful, and I think I showed previously the high on coffee script, but I'll show you again. High on coffee information. So they've got actually quite a nice cheat sheet as well, which is worth looking at for this project, which sort of points out some of the things that you might want to do. So let's say, you're trying to look at SUID binaries and things. You can have a look at explain some of the things that people will use to do stuff, how to get shells, tons of useful things. But the bit that we're really doing is they've got a script, and this script, which is here, it's actually just a simple bash script, as you can see. It runs through, in fact, here's a demonstration of it running. It runs through a bunch of things and finds as much information as possible. Some of it's really basic, so it'll do things like, where are we? Here we go. Find the Linux version, and it's going to do that. How's it going to do that? Hold on, just find out where it sets the variable. We've gone past it. Oh no, sorry, that's not finding the Linux version. I think they're just saying this is the Linux version of the script. So where's the actual data? There isn't any. Right, but it does things like this. It shows you the stuff that's in X issue, shows you stuff that's in X release. It's because this will give you information about the system, the state it's in, what release it's on, kernel information. So they're going to use uname minus AR, which is going to tell you what kernel version it's running on. So you can try these things out. Where are we? Uname minus AR will tell you what kernel version you're running on. You've got things like LSB release, which you do minus A, which will tell you not the kernel stuff, but the actual distro information. So you can see here we're running, Ubuntu, or at least a Ubuntu clone, because it's actually the LXLE, what release it's on, what code name it's got. Useful stuff, right? What else is useful? Catting what's in password. Why is that useful? Oops. So you're looking here, gives you a list of all the users on the system, gives you their user numbers, these unique identifiers, the group identifiers and things like that. So you've got all of that information. You could, have a look and see what files are writable by a particular person, so this user account and so on. And this script does a lot of that for you, right? So where's it gone? So it does a lot of this. It's a long script, but it does it all in one go. Right? It doesn't really give you the option to say, well, let's check this or let's check that. So your tool is going to do some of the same things, and if you want to look at how this works and recreate that functionality, that is absolutely fine. Obviously, you're going to be doing it in Python, but you can use os.system to do things. So, for example, here, this thing will work if you do it in Python. So let's try it over here. A bit slow. So what's it doing? It's finding all the things that this user can work with. So it'd be a very big list, but you can do that. Let's try it in somewhere a little bit less global. So in X, for example, what things can we work from? What things do we have rights for? So you can use these things. Very simple. But having a menu means you can pick which ones. You don't want to run everything all at once. The other thing that it should do is it should look for, if you see things that could be exploited, it should also allow you to, as much as possible, automate that process. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's say, for example, in the system, you find that you've got an SUID bit set on a particular binary. If you know that that is the case, that might be an exploitable one. And to look this stuff up, you can look up lolbas, or the new version of lolbins, or GTFO bins for, I forget which one's which now. GTFO is Linux, isn't it?
It is.
So this one is for Windows. So this is called living off the land binaries and scripts. So things that you can use to perhaps get privilege escalation or do some interesting things with. So let's see if we can find something. different ways to execute. Okay, to execute. So, for example, if we could find a way to run this as an administrator user on Windows, then we'd be able to execute files with it, and it will actually show you how those things might work. In GTFO bins, you'll find a big list of things that can be used to execute code if you've got them as SU-do. So let's say, for example, what would look really simple? Here we go, like curl, right? If we can use curl, we can do file read. Okay, so this might not be privesc, but it's going to give you, essentially a way to get things in a higher privilege level. So it might not be giving you a shell, but it would still, I would count this as a privilege escalation if you could use it to read a file. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, actually, it's not that difficult. If you look, all you need to do is give it a path to a file. It's not really difficult. So let's say, for example, I say curl file x shadow. Okay, it says can't open it. Let's try x password. Yeah, that works. Right, so I'm using curl instead of cat. But if it turned out that I could run curl with su-do privileges, or it's got a sticky bit, so maybe I can use su-do without a password, which is something you can test for. Su-do. What did I say? Oh yeah, curl. That's what we're doing. File x shadow. There we go. You can see the shadow file. Okay. So you've got ways to do things if you find that, say, curl has the SUID bit set, or in su-do -l, if it turned out there are certain things that you're allowed to run. So what can I run? At the moment I can run su-do with anything, but nothing on there says I can just do anything interesting without a password. But if you did, it would be there. So you can look through, have a think about these things, and what you're going to be doing really is you're going to try out a few of these vulnerabilities and see if you can detect them, and then try and write a little bit of Python to exploit it and put it into the menu system. Okay, that's the goal, to have those things in a menu. Now, what are you given? Well, by default, you don't get a huge amount. Okay, so I said this was going to be something that you've got to do for yourself, and inside the source is nothing but a couple of dummy functions which aren't really even that useful, and they're only really there so that it can be tested. Okay, so at the moment you've got nothing more than maybe a helpful makefile, and a readme that gives you some info and explains where to start. If you want to start with more, and that's absolutely fine, then you can also look at the starting point branch. In the starting point branch, inside source, you've got this menu-based thing. Okay, so you can see it's got, if name's main, it shows this menu, and if you've got a list of things, so here, where are we? A list of privilege escalations and a list of enumerations, and if you append things to it, they will then work. They'll be put in there. So how do we make those things? Well, again, I've given you some stuff. There is a plugins template, and if you look here, it gives you an idea of what generally an item for these things is, and a privilege escalation item or an enumeration item. It's up to you. You can go from here, or you can implement other stuff in here. What does that look like? Well, again, I've given you a dummy. So here is my example. Here is my example of a potential plugin. So I'll call it dumb su-do escalation, and it's related to the privesc. In there, you've got the initialization, and what it does, it acts as a password. It sets its name, its author, and its description, and it has a function that can execute things. Okay, and it uses this shell run function, which I've also given you in case you wanted to make use of that. So, because of all of this, and because we follow that hierarchy, it means that in here, when we say, right, we just have a list of these things, when we want to run them, we can just pick the one that we've chosen, and we can always say, well, what is the information about that chosen thing? Because there is an info function that comes with the superclass, and that will just give us some data. When we want to execute it, we just say chosen.execute. Okay, so if you wanted to use this little bit of a menu, and you wanted to use my tiny little hierarchy of objects, you can quite quickly get very simple objects made of your own enumerators and exploiting of things to get privilege escalation just by putting them in the right kind of class. Okay, so you can follow that as almost like a template. It is not a requirement that you do this.
This is supposed to work on Linux, correct?
So you can make it'll work on multiple things. My example works on Linux. So one of the things that I want you to do is to let's just go back to the documentation. So the basic task to start with is you should fork the framework once and it talks about how to go about it. And what you want to do is create a tool with a basic menu. Okay, so you've kind of given a bit of a menu there. You probably want to update that because it's not very good. Okay, hint, hint. I've given you lots of stuff now to help you make a good menu. And it should have 2 methods of enumeration and 1 method of privilege escalation. Okay, so that's for this, and each person needs to hand those things in. It doesn't have to work on multiple operating systems. You can assume it's being run on a particular OS. So if you're writing it on Linux, you can assume it's going to run on Linux. You can say this is for Linux, and there it is. Okay. Here's some examples of how you might actually run things like here os.system. It's very simple, and it gives you some idea. So you need to have written that 2 methods on this. Your group will have helped and put stuff together. So actually, you should have more than 2 of these things, but you're going to demonstrate what your bit of it is. Okay. The intermediate task means that you should really have in total 8 methods of enumeration and 4 methods of privilege escalation in the thing. So here you could just hand in your own, and you're not really going to be penalised for that. Obviously, building on the menu system is going to be group work, which you're not going to be marked for. So it's going to be just these bits that you're marked for. In this one, it requires that what you hand in has 8 methods of enumeration in total and 4 methods of privilege escalation in total, with each of the team member contributing at least 1 method of enumeration or escalation each. Okay, so you've got to write really your same number of things as up here, but you have to show that it works with other people's plugins. Does that make sense? Additionally to this, you also need to detect which operating system it's running on, and you need to have some example of running on the other operating system. So let's go with Windows. That'd be simple. If you've got a Mac and you want to do Linux or Mac, that's also fine. I would say one other. If you can get more than one other, then I'd be very impressed, and that's very good. There's also some examples of how to determine OS down here. Okay. What else was I going to say about this? Oh yeah, so an even spread across Windows and Linux would be ideal, but if you have mostly one OS with just 1 escalation and 1 enumeration method for another, that's enough. Okay, so and that's in total. In the marking, I'm going to want to see that your particular contribution, so the plugins that you make, you have at least 1 that works on another operating system, whether it's a PrivEsc or something else. So enumeration doesn't matter, but the total collection, I want to see that there's some variety in there. Again, it's not really something I'm going to mark groups down on for, but it's good to have examples of what other people do. And of course, because you all need to show that you can determine the OS in your plugin and work on a different OS, you'll have those anyway. The advanced task then is really just talking about how so far everything's coming straight to the terminal. You're displaying stuff, you're going there. What I would like for the advanced task, and this is the one to get up to the 100% on the functionality component, is really you want this to be able to work as logging to a file, right? So you want to be able to say, okay, I want to do this enumeration, but I want you to store it, and so you can then retrieve those files for later. Okay. So add an option to the menu that changes from terminal to output logging. Make sure you can log to a file of a given name and location, right? So you might say, right, yes, I want to log this to /tmp scan log or whatever you want to do it. And from then on, all of the outputs will always go there, and you can then retrieve that file. Also, it should be able to run with a parameter from the command line. So this is for the enumeration part. So for example, instead of just typing leap.py, we could write leap.py enumerate. And when you do this, no menu displayed, and all OS appropriate enumeration methods are run in order. Actually, the order doesn't matter that much, I suppose, but they'll all run one after the other, and the output goes out to the terminal. Okay, so we could also use it if we wanted to, like we use the High on Coffee script. So if you run leap.py on its own, you get the menu. If you leap.py and then put enumerate on the end, or some other switch, I don't really mind, then it will recognize that, and instead of displaying a menu, it will just run all of its enumeration commands that it's got, yeah, or at least the ones it's got that work on this system. And the advanced plus plus task, which is not required to get you know any extra marks, is just there because you know it's an interesting thing, and I think there's one or two people that you know will have time and you know maybe an interest to do it. And for this, what I'd like you to do is to replace the menu system that's running currently by using print. I want it to instead listen on a port and send that data back. Okay, so what you would do is you would install it somewhere, you get it to run, and it would then call back and provide the menu over that connection. So this is now like having a remote shell. Okay, but instead of just a remote shell, it's also going to be able to allow you to do remote enumeration and you know remotely use any sort of privest that you find, you know, things like that. So without having to log in first on that system through other means. So why would this
so do you mean over a network kind of thing?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So should you find a way, and it's not uncommon, you know, when you're doing pen tests and things, you find a way that lets you drop a file and get it executed, but you don't have a terminal to execute it yourself, then this is perfect. It's like a remote shell, but with some extra tools. Okay. Does that make sense to everyone? Or at least does everyone know that where they're looking for information and what the problem in front of them is? And that's a really good question. So do you want to test it on the VM? I was going to send a second VM out, and I realised that it's going to get really complicated trying to move the stuff across, and it's going to add a lot of hurdles. So what I'm going to suggest that you do is you look for those vulnerabilities in your own VM. Okay, so you'll be able to go and set things to you know set UID bit if you want to do that, or you can you can choose which ones you install. So you're going to have to learn a little bit about the vulnerabilities that you're scanning for and trying to abuse. I would recommend, if you're not sure about any of this, you look at the ones in GTFO bins. So this means these are essentially ways to do privilege escalation and other things that require nothing more than having sudo access to a particular file. Okay, so you can set that quite easily without too much fiddling around with the system, and you can test the stuff on there. How to make tests? I could do, but I can do better than that because I have a video all about testing that we did before. So I can send you a link to that, and you can let's test it. There you go.
Did you want us to make this like a command line tool kind of thing?
Yeah.
So we call it and give it parameters, etc.
Well, okay. So for the advanced task, the intermediate task, you should have at least one thing. So that would be leap enumerate, and you give it in the enumerate as part of the command line arguments, and it will run through all of its enumerators. If you want to add more, that's great, and that will definitely be considered to be a good example of code and elegance and that kind of stuff, to be able to switch things on and off. Like you might find perhaps you want to say enumerate, and you might want to switch that turns off OS detection. So you can actually say instead, look, I'm running on Windows. It might not look like it because it's reporting some dodgy stuff, but I want to force you to run the Windows scans. That would be a good idea.
Right, okay, so maybe have the option just to detect the OS or just the shell version or whatever.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you can think of all kinds of useful little bits and pieces that you might want to grab access to. So yeah, if you think of those, by all means, put them in. Simran says, what does the code mainly cover? Classes, objects? It's got classes and objects in it, definitely. But in terms of what you're given and what that covers, it's sort of bits of all sorts, really. Simple thing there. If you're the only person, or even if half the team or some proportion is wanting to do more of the advanced stuff, and you want to to demonstrate how that works, you do that in your fork. Okay, so remember that the plugin parts. So this stuff up to here and this stuff about the number of things that you do and sorry, not that stuff. Here we go. This stuff. So the basic parts and this. This is really only about your plugins. When you get to OS detection, this is where you'd put that into your fork. You'd work out, right, I'm going to work on this, so in my fork I'll have that. But the enumeration and privilege escalation stuff, those classes that you make for this, they should still work with people that are only doing the basic task. So there's no reason for you to have to stop or keep things separate. Just your fork will also include your modifications to the core that to do the OS detection or to do the command line stuff, like this in the advanced task. This is where you'd branch off. So your fork would become quite different. And so when you wanted to work on, say, for example, let's say you're doing the advanced task or even the advanced plus task, and you also want to tweak or build new enumerators, what you would do is you would go, right, okay, I'm going to branch from here, work on this, and then I can submit a pull request to that person, even if they're doing basic, around that branch, because the only difference there that needs to be merged is this, and you can specify which bits you want to do. So you can then go, right, instead of just sending it straight to them, just get a fork of their repository, merge into that for the bits that you want, so you can copy your code over quite easily, and you can submit from there. So you're going to end up in situations where you just use Git a little bit more creatively, but it's fine. So out of the tasks, the only one that's really mandatory is the basic one. You can pass the module by just doing the basic. That's not a problem. The doing of the others is all related to scoring. So, no. Yeah. So, for example, here, functionality. This bit here is a fail. So it's a near miss. You can attempt it, but didn't quite get there. Then to get these kinds of marks, so around up to the 55%, you do the basic functionality. To get this next set, which is anything up to and including a first, but not much over that, you're going to do the intermediate functionality. If you want to get significantly high marks, then over 70, you have to do the advanced bit. The advanced plus is not required to get full marks on these, but it's certainly going to help in terms of being able to show elegance and convention. If you've done things nicely, because you'll have done more on the command line stuff, you'll have shown your capabilities in other areas. So it'll sort of help a little to show the markers more of what you're doing, but it's not required. So the advanced plus is absolutely not a requirement for you to do. You can see again that everything here has its own requirements. So you can still score good marks on here that are better than what you're scoring for the functionality. Your documentation can be on point, even if your functionality is a bit weak. You maybe haven't done the basic task, but you can still get up to that full 10 marks for this if you've got clear and readable documentation with examples, links to resources, etc. as appropriate.
James, regarding this group work, are we working as individuals in this group whereby no cross communication or something that might be classed as collusion otherwise?
No, you're required to work together on the first bit of the task, so that you have a common starting point for the framework. Okay, which can be based on mine, or it can be generated by yourselves, however you want to do it. So that's fine. And then it's only the bits that you're going to hand in, so your plugins and then your later modifications that you need to do yourself. By all means, discuss it as part of group work. Just remember that there is a line. It's not difficult to know where that line is. So just be aware of it, and you should be okay. So don't give people copies of codes that for them to hand in. If you want to talk about things, that's fine. If they're going to see your code as well, don't forget that's going to be part of it. So you're going to be showing them your code because you're going to give them copies of your plugins, your privilege escalation, and so they will see it. But at the same time, it's very difficult to see how you're going to end up in a plagiarism situation by accident, because if you both submit the same plugin, your Git repositories will tell me who wrote it. And that would just be a very silly thing to do. So make sure that you just, the bits that you're handing in, highlight in the report, this is my plugin. In fact, if you do it the way I've suggested, each plugin has an author tag in it anyway. So you put a field in there that tells you who the author was. So you're going to be exposed to more risk of cheating than previously, but it is the right amount of risk, and is hopefully only going to highlight the kind of lines that you'll have to walk later on. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Thank you. Just this another one. So giving someone a nudge in the right direction, how would that be classed? As to instead of giving someone the answer, but giving someone a nudge as to, right, if you look into that or X, Y, Z, it might be able to help you.
Look into X, Y, Z is absolutely fine. If you've got something that someone's struggling on, and you've solved something similar but different, as long as it's not giving them an answer. Hold on. Raheem, I'm just going to mute you. So if you're giving someone an example of how something similar is solved, as long as it's not something they're going to copy and paste in, it's not that close, even that's okay. But just be aware that as soon as you start showing them code, make sure it's not code that is going to be the solution to the problem they've got. If you want to go, look, this is how I did something similar, like, I need to loop over some stuff. Well, this is how I looped over these things. You've got different things to loop over, but that's okay, because it's exactly what we'd really expect them to do when they go and look at examples. All right. What we don't want is for them to have exactly the same input. So it needs to be something separate.
Thank you for that, James.
No problem. Simran, no, you don't need to do master documentation. I want each person to provide their own report. In terms of documenting the code, that means that each person will document their plugins. So that's obviously theirs, and that will go into the source. And it does tell you to write down some group documentation at the start to help you work. But I'm not going to be marking you particularly on the group part of it. I'm going to be marking the stuff you hand in for your report. Excuse me. As we go on, let me just have a look down here. Yeah, submission. It's the same kind of thing. Excuse me. Sorry, I've been talking for hours and hours now. Culty. Right. Same kind of thing. Instructions, unit tests, link to the repository. I'm going to update this guidance, and the reason for this is I didn't realise how much of a pain this would be to actually mark. So what I'm going to be asking for instead is the link, but also a screenshot of your commits. Because actually trying to keep logging in to everyone's repository slows down a lot. I mean, it's a really laborious process trying to get through that. So we'll try and speed that up, and that'll help us get the mark back a little bit quicker as well. So I'll update this a little bit over the next week, just to sort of clear up some of these, give a little bit more guidance. I might even put other bits of notes around, but I'll tell people if I expand anything to help out. And also, as we're going along, if people ask good questions, I'll try and make sure that everyone gets the answers. Because here it's great because everyone's talking and asking questions, in the chat or on voice, and you can all hear it. But if someone comes and asks a question in a couple of days' time, I think is worth sharing. I'll try and find a way to work that into the documentation or announce it somewhere. So I'll try and keep everyone as informed as possible about all available information.
Would you like to see hardware detection, or is that just like a bonus feature kind of thing?
That I would count that as a really good enumeration, because there are plenty of exploits that rely on particular hardware. If you look at things like Rowhammer or the Broadcom exploits, that definitely depends on particular hardware. So if you can identify the CPU, the CPU model, the graphics card, that kind of stuff, Ethernet details, all that's good stuff.
did you want any network information? So potentially like MAC address and things like that.
List of interfaces would be good. In their IP addresses, who their DNS server is, what the MAC address is. If you can get the model numbers out of it, that would be good. I mean, some stuff you don't have to be too fancy with some of it, right? So one of the things that you could do is you could have like a tool that just uses things like LSHW and captures the stuff that comes out. So which I think is fairly standard now. Of course, if it's not there, it would be nice to have another way to do it. So you could just use like LSHW, and it gives you a bunch of information about things. So let's have a look at what it thinks we've got here. Network. So you can see here, this actually does give you information. If you didn't have LSHW, you'd have to find some other way to do it. So I would like to see people finding ways to get that information without special tools. And one of the best ways to do that is if you look inside proc and dev. So proc will tell you about the running system, and the stuff in dev will tell you about a lot of the hardware. So let's have a look. Let's just jump into dev. So you can see here there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And some of this stuff will be, about different buzzes like the USB buzz and the IDE and things like that. Sorry, it took me a second to remember where we were. So let's have a look. USB. Let me just collapse that a bit. 01, and then so that's going to be USB bus 1, then device 1 on it. So let's see if we can see what's in there. Okay, so it's not something that's going to be easy to read in that case. So you can look up how to decode it, or however you want to do that. We can't look in mem. That probably makes sense. Well, let's see. It's not ported actually. Looks interesting. So you won't get into everything as a default user, but some of them you will. What else? Oh yeah, proc, that was the other one. So proc is very useful. So for example, just listing these things here, these numerical ones, these are all the process IDs running on the system currently. So you can find information there. I think it'd be quite nice to go through all of the numeric ones of that. So let's say we go into, tell you what, let's run something just so we can test it out. So I don't know, xcalc, yeah. All right, so xcalc is a little calculator. So yeah, there it is, and we can find the IP address of the process ID of xcalc. So we can use things like pidov, xcalc, and it tells us 9105. So if I go into the directory 9105, which is here, these are all things that relate to that running process. So you can look at things like what's actually being run. So exe will be a symlink to it. CW2 is its current working directory, shows you where it was executed from. Line will actually tell you what command line options it was given. So let me just close that off a second. Stipple. I don't know what that's going to do, but we'll run it with that as an option. I think it's changed the way it colours in the background. We need to find the new process ID because it's not the same one anymore. 9172. And you can see it was also given stipple as an option, so it contains all the information there. It looks like there's no space between them, but I have a feeling that it's just because it's not actually displaying very well as plain text. If we did a hex dump on CMD line, I think, yeah, And you see there's actually the 0 terminator there. So clearly what you've got is XCALC 0, which is not really a printable character, minus STIPPLE, and then another 0. So, you know, we're viewing it there, but actually what you'd want to do is load that and then split it around 0. So that would give you all of the parts. Anyway, lots of stuff you can do. And what I expect, you've got lots of links that you can use, but you can also look up stuff like look up how High on Coffee does it. Look up some like basic Privesc stuff. You don't need to get really fancy with all of them. You know, do some basics and go, right, that works. And then think, okay, if it works, I want to do something more interesting. What would it look like? Because it would actually be quite a useful tool for you to be able to build up from. Yeah. And also definitely look at how things like proc and dev work. I don't know whether it's something that still works, but we used to be able to do like really weird stuff like cat, proc.
You can no longer send the mouse to the sound card, the internal speaker, which is a shame. Because that used to be quite good fun to. I used to do that to Kemp quite often, didn't I? Pipe dev random to his internal sound card. So.
Okay, so this isn't going to work with this. You do. So let's just see. Swordfish, and there we go. Oh, no, nothing coming out. Maybe it's mess 1. Maybe it's mess 1. I hope. No, nothing coming out anymore. I wonder what changed. So you used to be able to pick up mouse inputs, and you then also would be able to put stuff into dev. Was it DSP?
Yeah.
Anymore.
That's it. It's
SMD.
gone. It's something new.
Ooh, they just out it. If that's it, I don't know what that is. Yeah, we used to be able to do all kinds of stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe that's it. Do I dare try and cat something into it? Of course I do. Hold on. No, it doesn't let me write into there either. Oh well. Probably a good thing though. But yeah, there's a bunch of things that you can do, and information you find quite easily. If you remember, just using things like find to find what the current user can do, actually finding out who the current user is, who is currently logged in. That kind of stuff is really simple to do. You can do os.system to get these things from inside Python. So you can test out a bunch of stuff. You can also launch other shells, so you can drop into a shell as you've seen, and you've got an example of that. Or you can even look at the other ways to generate shells, and things like xterm is not a bad thing to have. And okay, if you're doing it remotely, it might be a problem, but if you've got X forwarding and stuff on, it is one way to get an interactive shell that's quite nice, rather than sometimes with Privesc you end up with a bit of a broken shell and have to deal with it. If you use xterm, you get a nice graphical shell if you can get it up and running. So you feel free to add other tools. You don't have to just stick to those things. I will accept people going for like more utility functions. If you want to do that, talk to me if you want those to be what you're assessed on, and I'll tell you whether it meets the requirements for marking. But if you want to add them as well as doing the Privesks and enumerations, that's also fine. So, any other questions?
Sorry, James, I was mid-typing.
That's all right. I'm just looking to see if anything in there is.
I was going to say, Rahim sent you a private message.
Okay, so Rahim, was it you that wanted the private chat? I think it was, wasn't it? So, yeah. Since there's no other questions, I think I'm gonna say goodbye now. Stop the video, and then I'll jump over to Rahim. Rahim, was it you that said you were in my personal tutor group? I've forgotten it. Someone did, and they've never turned up.
In terms of privilege escalation, did you want us to get to root or something?
Yeah, exactly. So if you can switch to root or another account, or even if you did things like if you can get the contents of like Shadow, you don't necessarily have to drop a shell. I would count it as a successful privesc if you can get hold of files that normally you wouldn't be able to. So things that root can get access to.
Just put a link in chat for all of you guys about the coursework stuff, because there's a lot of questions that are exactly there. Like it answers a lot of them. Like, when's the due date? It's right on there.
I'm having sure that's Terry Simon due at 6 p.m. Yes, just check with Terry that there's no other reason that might not work. But yes, the 24-hour grace period I think is universal. So I don't see why it wouldn't. Mattia, we didn't really. This is not really the topic of this. You don't have to do anything complicated. You can look the stuff up. If you're really not sure of any of them, maybe what I'll do is what do we do on Wednesday? On the Friday session this week, I might even go over some basic privesks that you can then implement. Right, so I'll show you how to do them, but without scripting them. So I'll do them by hand. And then your job just becomes, how do I do that with Python?
James, just before you go,
yeah,
it's probably going to be a no. But is there a way to write a script using Bash and use that in Python?
Oh yeah, easily. I mean, if you look at, just going to switch over to this. If you look at my weird function, and it probably looks like it's weirder than it needs to be, and it probably is. But what it does is it creates a bash script, puts the commands in, makes it executable, drops you into a shell, tells you where it is, and says, right, go ahead and run that. And when you come out, it deletes it again. The reason being, sometimes it's easier to do that than to try and run every command from inside Python. So this is what does it here. So it makes a temp file, which is using this temp file thing, but you could have given it an actual name if you want to. And then it writes the command into it. Okay, so it puts it in there, makes it executable, and then tells you to go and run it. But actually, I could have just run it in the spawn as well. So I could have written it into a shell thing and put it there. So if you wanted to keep chunks of like bash scripts that you want to execute, you can do, and you can drop them in a file, execute, and then even delete the file afterwards, because that's what this is doing. So if you wanted to see, then off you go. So in fact, all I need to do to switch that around, I've left it in, that will do what you just asked, right? That will put it into a bash script and then execute the bash script.
I was just thinking that for something like this, because we're doing these smaller task banded one, the bash scripting I could be wrong. It offers a bit more flexibility than Python itself? Is that correct assumption?
I wouldn't quite put it like that, but it definitely gives you more options because you've now got bash stuff and Python stuff, right? So sometimes you might struggle to get it all into a Python os.system, but really os.system is just running bash commands, like you're literally running shell commands in there anyway. So it's just a good way to package them up. If you wanted to do it, and so that, I mean, Joe, it would be quite a useful thing to be able to drop useful stuff. Like you go, oh, do you know what? I need a PHP reverse shell, right? Go and get the one that comes in Kali, or look one up online, and it'll be a PHP script that you want to put in place. Maybe you just add a menu item. I would call that a useful privesc, where what you do is go, right, I need this dropped in the right place. Press that menu option, tell me the path you want to put it, and it literally puts a file with that content in the right place, so that then on the web side, you go in and activate that web shell, done.
Perfect, thank you for that. And so is there any objections to looking at examples of Metasploit itself, such as the scripts that they use and the reverse shells or anything like that?
Say absolutely go and do that. If it was the fact that if Metasploit was written in Python, which is not, then I would say, maybe don't look too close in case you end up with something identical, because that would be a good place for it. But it's not. It's Ruby, isn't it? Metasploit.
Yeah, Ruby, Ruby or Rails or something like that.
So I'll add that to my list of things to go back and change if I get a time machine. Go back and go to the first person that starts Metasploit, get in it, and they just go, right, I'm just going to write some Ruby, and then I appear and go, Python.
Yeah.
That would have been,
so much more
if
helpful.
that choice had been different, I would have loved it. Anyway.
Thank you for that, James.
No problem. Right, I'm going to get in that call now with Brahim. So I'm going to stop. I've stopped the recording now.
I just had a really good idea.